My dear friends, there is a sacred solitude that the soul must pass through before it can ever be truly strong. The world fears loneliness, but heaven often meets us there. The power of being alone is not in the silence itself, but in what we hear because of the silence. Let me share with you 5 eternal truths that unveil the holy power of being alone. When God seeks to mold a soul, He does not begin in the crowd. He begins in the quiet. Solitude is not simply the absence of others. It is the presence of refinement. In solitude, all the masks we wear fall away. There is no one left to impress, no one to deceive, no one to applaud or condemn. Only the raw, unedited version of yourself standing before the face of eternity. And it is in that sacred space that transformation begins. The furnace does not comfort, it burns. It exposes every impurity and brings every weakness to the surface. But it does not destroy, it purifies. Solitude is that holy fire where the ego is melted and the soul is reshaped. It is the place where your false self dies and your real identity begins to emerge. Not the one the world gave you, but the one heaven always intended. Think of the great souls in history. Moses on the mountain, David in the fields, Elijah in the cave, Paul in the desert, and even our Lord in the wilderness. Each one was called away from the noise so they could hear the only voice that truly matters. It was not punishment, it was preparation. Before they could lead nations or write truth or bear the weight of divine mission, they had to sit in the fire of solitude and be remade. We often run from being alone because it feels like abandonment. But the truth is, God often clears the room when He's about to enter. He removes the props and distractions so that we might lean wholly on Him. The pain you feel in solitude is not a sign of your weakness. It is the labor of a new self being born. So do not despise the seasons when you feel alone. You are not being buried, you are being planted. And when you rise again from that holy furnace, you will not come out as who you were, but as who you were always meant to be. In the stillness of being alone, the noise of the world begins to fade, and what remains is not emptiness, but clarity. We are so accustomed to the chatter of others, the endless opinions, the constant noise of culture, that we forget the soul was designed to commune with the eternal. And God, in His wisdom, often waits to speak until everything else has been silenced. Alone is not a place of isolation. It is the sanctuary where the voice of God becomes audible. The world speaks loud, but God speaks low. He doesn't shout over the chaos. He whispers beneath it. That whisper can only be heard by a heart that has been quieted, stilled, and set apart. We do not hear Him because we are too busy listening to everyone else. We do not discern His guidance because we are constantly drowning in external influences. But the moment we allow ourselves to be alone, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually, we begin to tune in to a different frequency, the divine one. Remember Elijah. He did not hear God in the wind, nor in the earthquake, nor in the fire. All were dramatic, loud, attention, grabbing, but none were divine. God came in the still, small voice. Why? Because the Lord does not compete for attention. He waits for reverence. He waits for you to value His voice enough to silence all others. When you are alone, you are not cut off. You are positioned. You are finally in a posture where God can speak without interruption, where He can reveal truth without resistance, where He can reorder your steps without confusion. In solitude, your ears become uncluttered, your heart becomes tender, and your mind becomes renewed. Many people pray, but few actually listen. Many seek answers, but refuse the silence in which the answer is given. God often hides His direction in quiet moments. The burning bush was in the wilderness. The angel appeared to Mary in her private chamber. Christ rose in a garden with no crowds, no trumpets, just divine stillness. Sacred things are rarely shouted. So if you long to hear the voice of God, do not search for it in noise. Do not expect Him to compete with your distractions. Set yourself apart. Step away from the opinions, the performance, the people. Be still, not because you are defeated, but because you are expectant. And in that silence, that sacred aloneness, you will find not just a whisper, but a word that will guide you, ground you, and guard you all the days of your life. The strongest souls in history did not begin their journeys on platforms or surrounded by admirers. They began in the shadows, walking paths no one else could understand, carrying burdens no one else could see. Before they ever stood before crowds, they stood alone wrestling with God, confronting their own weakness, and surrendering to a purpose far greater than themselves. Strength, real strength, is not born in applause. It is born in isolation. The world is fascinated by the visible success of leaders, but it often forgets the lonely preparation that came before. Every great calling is preceded by a season of separation. Joseph had dreams, but before he ever ruled in Egypt, he was betrayed by his brothers, falsely accused, and left in a prison. David was anointed as king, yet he returned to tending sheep and spent years fleeing for his life in caves. Even our Lord, before he began his public ministry, withdrew into the wilderness for 40 days to face the enemy with no human ally in sight. Why? Because before God trusts you with people, He tests you with solitude. Crowds are easy to impress. Solitude is impossible to fake. When you are alone, there is no mask, no stage, no validation. It's just you and your character. And it is in that solitude that God purifies motives, strengthens resolve, and teaches you to lead from a place of humility, not pride. A soul that has walked alone with God is no longer addicted to the praise of man. It doesn't crumble under pressure, nor bend to popular opinion. It has learned to be anchored in something deeper, someone eternal. We often think leadership is about charisma, but God is not looking for the loudest voice. He is looking for the deepest roots, and deep roots are not grown in public. They are grown in quiet obedience, in secret struggles, in unseen surrender. That's why the strongest leaders are not those who rise quickly, but those who have been buried and broken and yet kept walking, kept praying, kept trusting when no one was watching. If you find yourself in a season where you are walking alone, take heart. You are not being punished. You are being prepared. You are not forgotten. You are being formed. The silence around you is not empty. It is filled with divine instruction. And when the time is right, when the crowd finally gathers, you will not lead them from ego, but from experience. You will not need their approval, because you've already walked with the one who called you. So embrace the lonely path, for it is the trail of the strong. Walk it with faith, walk it with courage, and know this: God does His deepest work in the hearts of those who dare to walk alone with Him first. Alone is not the same as lonely. Loneliness is the ache of absence, but being alone with God is the fullness of presence. The world teaches us to fear solitude, as if our value is tied to how many people surround us, how many texts we receive, how often our phone lights up. But heaven measures us by something far deeper: how full we are when everything external is stripped away. When you are filled with God, you may be alone, but you are never empty. There is a sacred kind of aloneness that does not drain, it strengthens. It doesn't echo with sorrow, it hums with peace. Because in that space, the soul is finally free from performance, from comparison, from the exhausting need to prove its worth. When you are filled with God, you begin to see solitude not as a void to escape, but as a sanctuary to enter. You are no longer desperate for people to validate your existence, because you already carry the approval of the one who created you. It is not companionship that cures loneliness. It is connection. And the deepest connection the soul can ever have is with its Creator. People may walk in and out of your life, but God remains. He is not seasonal. He does not ghost you, betray you, or abandon you when you're too much or not enough. His presence is constant. And when you truly open yourself to that presence, even the silence becomes sacred. Some of the most peaceful people in the world are not the ones surrounded by friends or fortune, but those who have discovered how to sit alone with God and not feel lack. They have learned the beauty of still mornings with prayer, the joy of walking without needing conversation, the richness of knowing that wherever they go, they carry heaven within them. And perhaps that is what we are most afraid of, not the silence around us, but the noise within us that we've never addressed. But here's the grace. When you are filled with God, He doesn't just meet you in the silence. He cleanses it. He quiets the storm in your heart. He fills the empty spaces with purpose. He replaces the ache with assurance. So, do not confuse being alone with being abandoned. God is often closest when people are furthest. He draws near to those who dare to dwell in quiet places. And once you've tasted the peace that His presence brings, you'll never again crave cheap company to escape yourself. You'll walk through life with a stillness the world doesn't understand. And that stillness, that sacred fullness, is what makes solitude so powerful. The devil does not fear the noisy or the popular. He does not tremble before those who move the crowds or chase the spotlight. He fears the quiet soul, the one who has made peace with being unseen, the one who has carved out a sanctuary in solitude, and who has chosen to walk with God when no one else is watching. That soul is dangerous because it cannot be manipulated by flattery, intimidated by fear, or distracted by noise. It is anchored in something far deeper than circumstances. It is rooted in divine presence. The enemy thrives in chaos. He works through confusion, distraction, and the hunger for approval. He whispers through the crowd and manipulates through the fear of being alone. But when a soul has found peace in the presence of God, when it no longer needs constant affirmation from the outside world, that soul becomes untouchable, not because it is perfect, but because it is settled. It knows who it belongs to, and it walks in a quiet, immovable authority. This is why the devil attacked Jesus not in the temple, but in the wilderness. When Christ was alone, fasting and hidden, Satan came with every trick in his arsenal, tempting him with power, identity, and relief. But Jesus, secure in His Father's presence, resisted without fear. The wilderness did not weaken Him, it proved Him, and that is the pattern for every believer who dares to walk alone with God. The devil will come, but he will flee, because he cannot control a soul that no longer craves what He offers. A soul at peace with God cannot be bought by applause or broken by rejection. It doesn't panic when left out. It doesn't chase after attention. It has tasted something eternal, and no counterfeit can satisfy. The devil loses his grip when he cannot manipulate your emotions, when your self-worth is no longer tied to likes, followers, compliments, or the presence of others. That kind of freedom terrifies hell. This is why God often draws His strongest warriors into seasons of solitude, not to harm them, but to arm them. He teaches them how to hear His voice above the noise. He trains them to depend on heaven when earth disappoints. And when they emerge from that place of hiddenness, they don't come out desperate for the world's recognition. They come out clothed in spiritual authority, having fought battles in silence that most will never see. So if you are walking through a season where you feel alone, take heart. You are not losing, you are being fortified. You are learning to stand when others would fall, to pray when others would panic, to stay faithful when others seek escape. The devil is watching, and he is afraid, not because you are loud, but because you are unshakably still. Because peace is not passive, it is warfare, and the one who walks in peace with God walks in power against darkness. You don't need to shout to shake the gates of hell. You just need to be still and know that He is God. So if you find yourself alone today, do not despair. Do not run from it. Walk into it. Walk into the quiet until you hear the whisper. Sit in the silence until you meet the shepherd. The power of being alone is this: it is not the end of you. It is the beginning of who God always intended you to be. Let the world chase noise. Let your soul chase God. And there, in that sacred solitude, you will rise.